Welcome back, creatures of the night. The story that follows is a classic Halloween tale written by the late John Madson, outdoor writer on the staff of the Olin Conservation Department. It first appeared in the Alton Telegraph. John told some, it's true. You decide. I've said nothing about this before, for reasons that will be clear, but I must stay silent no longer. The time has come to warn the people of something terrible that may be abroad this time of year. Exactly 5 Halloweens ago, I was duck hunting alone on Calhoun Point. I stayed until quitting time, long after other hunters had gone, and there was less than an hour of daylight left when I began picking up my decoys. It had been a windy afternoon. Some of my best blocks had dragged their anchors and drifted into the brush. I managed to find them, but needed a flashlight to do it. It was well after dark before I was ready to leave, and had hardly started down the slough when I hit a sunken log that almost tore out the lower unit of my motor. I couldn't find a spare shear pin, and had to wade from one duck blind to another until I found a bit of fence wire that would serve as a shear pin if I nursed the motor at half throttle. By 9 o'clock, I was finally underway. The maze of sloughs was as black as the inside of a tomb, although now and then the ragged clouds would let the moon through and give me a vague idea of where I was heading. It was tough going, and of course it wasn't long before I took a wrong turn. The moon had come out just long enough to show me that I was off course, and I had begun a tight circle in the narrow slough coming under the trees and brush of the shoreline. As I did so, a great shadow swept over me, and I heard a powerful gust of wind through the trees. I looked up, expecting to see a cloud over the moon. It was no cloud. The wind was driven by a vast pair of wings, and at that same time, I smelled the foulest stench I have ever known. It was a carrion smell, the rotten smell of decay, like masses of dead snakes in a wet hollow. There is no other way to describe it, but it was not the sort of thing that is ever smelled by day. That's all I could make of it. Something huge, flying at me in the night, and the awful stink of it. I must have crouched there in the boat for an hour or more, run partly up under the trees and brush with the motor stalled. Until then, I hadn't known what the words "frozen with fear" really meant. But I knew it then, and had to drive myself to push out of the protecting brush and start the motor again. I soon knew where I was and how long it would take to reach the river. The channel was widening and deepening, and in spite of my fence wire shear pin, I kept the motor at full throttle. Then it returned. I don't know what made me look back over my shoulder, but up there against the black night, there was an even blacker shadow, as large as a small airplane, coming swiftly down upon me. I laid the boat hard over, and just in time as the great shadow swept past. This time, as it rose, it gave a horrible cry. It wasn't the clear scream of a hawk, but a hoarse squeal of rage, a banshee squall that still haunts my dreams. As the thing rose and circled, it crossed the moon. And for the first time, I caught a glimpse of its outline. How many times I wished I hadn't. I can still see the huge bat wings and the ugly, powerful body beneath those wings. There was something like scales on the belly and great clawed feet. There was that stench again, more sickening and overpowering than ever. I can't remember the trip to the landing where my pickup truck was parked. I don't even remember trailering my boat. For a long time, I just sat there in the locked truck, shaking, trying to pull myself together, wondering if I had lost my mind. What had I seen? What was that foul and evil monster out there in the night above Calhoun Point? Yet, in spite of my terror, I felt there was something strangely familiar about that evil shape. Somewhere at some time I had seen that outline before. On my way back to Alton on a hunch, I stopped at a turnoff and put the lights of my truck on the face of the cliff where the image of the Piasa bird is painted. That moment, I think, was the most terrifying of all, for the blank face of rock was unmarked, there was no Piasa bird painted on the cliff. I didn't go to work the next morning. Instead, I drove back up the river road and stopped where I could see my tire tracks and footprints in the soft ground where I'd stopped the night before. And up there in full daylight on the face of the cliff was the painted figure of the Piasa bird, as vivid and ugly as ever. The thing had come back to roost. But in the air there was a stench of a foul and familiar smell. It was over a year before I could bring myself to mention my living nightmare to an old riverman in Grafton. I half expected my friend to laugh, but he didn't. Instead, his weathered face grew pale, and he said quietly, "Yes, I know just what you mean, but say no more. Some things are better not talked about. So, believe me or not, friend editor, it's your choice. But never again will I be found in the sloughs of Calhoun Point in the black haunted midwatches of Halloween night. No, sir, not I." Happy Halloween. I'm Jim White. We're going to have CBS News on the hour.